So, hello everyone. Thank you so much for listening and watching to Elephant in the Room Unboxed. So honored and privileged to have the very cool Mike Korenblit. And I know I've messed your name up.
No,
How's
that
it?
was right.
Yay! How are you, Mike?
I'm doing well.
Good, good, good.
I'll hopefully feel a lot better in about 6 days.
Yeah. We're going to get into that. We're going to definitely get into that. So, really grateful to have you here. You are part of Respect for Diversity, which is one of our partners. So, thank you. And tell everyone a little bit about Respect for Diversity.
In 1980, in 2000, Joan and I had gone through a midlife crisis, as we all do, right? And we moved back here to Oklahoma, and I bought the Cold Court Oyster Bar downtown. And so it was a great place. It was like Cheers. We owned it when the bombing took place.
Wow.
We helped take care of all the fire and rescue people who would come into the bar. We had great clientele that made sure that they didn't pay for anything. So it was, but then after 7 years, it was time to go back into education.
Okay.
And so Joan and I decided that we would create a foundation because of my parents' background, which we will get into
Yes.
in a little bit. And we started in 2000
Okay.
and had our first programs. I guess it was about 6 months later.
Okay.
We had a whole speakers bureau that eventually we set up that has Holocaust educators, civil and human rights activists, musicians, artists, storytellers, poets, whatever their expertise, we send them into schools, churches, businesses, civic organizations, government agencies to fulfill our mission, which is teaching understanding, respect, and acceptance for all people, no matter their differences.
Nice.
And the reason we started it in the first place was because of my own parents' background, two Holocaust survivors.
Wow.
And so I did from a very young age, what it means when you don't have that respect for a human being, a human life. So that's why we created the foundation.
Nice.
And in that 24-year period, we have worked with over 800,000 students, teachers, and adults here in the state of Oklahoma with our programs, including the podcast that we've been doing for the last 2 years
Yes.
with you all.
Yes.
So that's
Yes.
another reach that, is out there.
Perfect. So explain, you said that you and Joan came back, and for you all that don't know, Joan is his wife. You and Joan came back. Where did you go?
We were living in Washington, D.C.
Okay.
And what happened is we had twins.
Okay.
Well, we didn't. My wife had twins. I was part of it.
You were there, but not there.
I was there. And my Joan's father was getting older and kind of the onsets of dementia.
Okay.
And then my parents were living here in Oklahoma. And because I didn't have grandparents, because they were murdered in the Holocaust, I wanted our kids to grow up with grandparents. And so we made the decision to move back here to Oklahoma.
Got it.
So that's where we were.
Got it. So for those of you who have not figured it out, Mike is Jewish. Would you explain the type of Jew you are?
Yes. I am a very secular Jew, but what draws me to Judaism is the social action that Judaism expounds.
Agreed.
And that is what draws me to Judaism, because how important it is for Jews to be socially active in the world around them. And so my son, though, is special needs, and he plays instruments. So Friday nights, he's there at the temple and he's playing with our cantor there.
Nice.
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 And he enjoys that. So
nice.
So.
Nice. So let's pivot for a minute. You spoke about social activism. I'll quote Mrs. Obama, "You all are doing something." How does this impact the upcoming election?
Well, because the Respect Diversity Foundation is a 501(c), we have to be very careful about any kind of.
Understood.
We can speak out about issues, which
Right.
is what we do.
Right.
That's what the foundation does. It's whenever I go out and speak, I make reference to things that have been happening in this country dealing with the election. I will go back to one, and I can tie that directly to the Holocaust. And that is Joseph Goebbels was Adolf Hitler's propaganda minister. And he was the one that came up with the phrase, "The more you tell a lie, the more people will believe it."
That's right.
What happened in 2000, in 2020, at the election, they said it was stolen, and they continued to repeat that lie over and over and over again until you see what people think in this country now. And anybody who says, do you want to have a discussion about something, I say, I will be happy to debate anybody who's opposite from what I believe in, if you answer one question. And that one question is, who won the 2020 election? And if they can't say they don't know, or that it wasn't Joe Biden, then I have no basis to sit there and talk with them.
Oh, wow.
Because how would you?
Got it.
When they don't believe that it was a fair election that was held, when everybody has said so, including the courts. So where do you go with that?
Well, if that's a literal question, for me, it would be delving into the facts. It would creating a space for them to feel comfortable to share their thoughts based on those facts, and then asking them, how can facts be refuted? And so, in essence, asking lots of questions, not to change anyone's mind,
Right.
just to make sure we are operating on the same playing field of, this is the facts I have. Is this the facts you have?
Understand that. And as far as a safe space, absolutely. When I would talk to them, it would be in a respectful way. But if they can't answer that question, there is no jumping off point.
Understood.
There's just not.
Understood.
Because that's why we are in the situation that we are in today. When people believe that, to this day, it's something like over half of the Republican people do not believe that Joe Biden is the duly elected president of the United States.
I didn't realize the numbers were that high.
Oh, yeah.
Wow. And so how do you think, as it relates to this topic and just, in essence, elections, politics in Oklahoma as a whole, how do you think people are involved or not involved or straddling the fence?
I think what I've seen is that after Kamala came into the spotlight here, I think it energized people all across this country.
Agreed.
And including here in Oklahoma, the Democratic Party and those people who are like-minded, that it gave them a real boost. And I think we've seen that. What'll happen, I don't know, but if there is one place that they may be able to win, it is here in Oklahoma County with Oklahoma City. So that it'll be interesting to see, what happens with that and what the vote is.
I'm really hopeful. So circle back. When Vice President Harris made her first speech, I was there.
Were you really?
Yeah, so I'm a Zeta, and
wow.
that was her first
Yes,
place to
wow.
speak, and so that was a very powerful moment.
Oh, yes.
To be in a space where. So, and I'm going to circle back some more. I remember reading about Shirley Chisholm. I remember when Senator Clinton ran, and I see another woman. I'm having a brain fart on her name. I think she was running for vice president in the 80s.
Don't know.
I see her face.
she
This is
would've-
going to drive me nuts.
You mean ran for president? You
Or
mean?
maybe she ran for president.
Yeah, I don't know but I don't know.
The reason I bring those human beings up, they're all women.
Yep.
And growing up, I did not see women as president. It's pretty much been a male-dominated thing since the beginning of time. Okay. And to see these women make great strides, although they were not successful, it spoke a lot. And so to be there when Vice President Harris spoke, it was like, oh wow, I've just watched history be made.
Yes.
To know what I am hopeful for with next month's elections, and you said it earlier, that when Vice President Harris said, this is what I'm going to do, I am now running, the energy has risen in ways that I haven't seen. Like I remember when President Carter ran, I remember, and I was a kid, but I don't remember that level of energy.
Right.
And it could be because I was a kid and just, I
Right.
couldn't vote.
Yeah. Fine.
I remember that energy when President Obama ran. And so to see it again, I just want to figure out ways to keep that energy going throughout the year.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. But I will go back around too, like you like to do, and that is the very first person that I supported to run for president of the United States was Shirley Chisholm.
No way.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Yep.
Wow. Have you seen the documentary?
Part of it. Haven't
Okay.
seen the whole thing.
Okay.
But yeah, it's,
Okay.
I understand it's very powerful.
It
and
is.
It is. And,
It is.
she was way ahead of her time.
Yes, she was.
But she
Agreed.
had a point to prove. One, as a woman. Two, as a black woman.
That part.
And
Yes.
I think that that's so important that people understand that. And sometimes the reason you run is not necessarily for policy and stuff, but to have people understand we are here and we need to be heard and listened to. We may
Agreed.
disagree, but that's okay.
And that's okay. Agreed. So on that, what has been your experience being a Jew in Oklahoma?
Oh, I know the people can't see this, but I am wearing a yarmulke right now.
Okay.
I started wearing a yarmulke permanently on November the 10th, 2016.
Okay.
Why do you think that was the date that I started wearing that yarmulke all the time?
2016. That was an election year.
It was indeed.
That was when President Obama was no longer president and President Trump became president.
Absolutely.
There it is.
If anybody looked at me, they would not know I was Jewish.
Agreed.
So that was my way to identify with all of those groups that Donald Trump went after. A black person can be identified. Hispanic person
Right.
can be identified.
Right.
Gay person can't.
Fair.
Asian person can't.
Right.
Disabled person can
Right.
be identified.
Right.
Every single one of those groups are people
Right.
that he went after. Well, no one could know with me
Right.
until I had that yarmulke on. And I have worn it ever since. except I swore that I would keep wearing it until the day that Donald Trump was out of office, was that he was defeated. And actually what happened when he was defeated, I had two of close rabbis here. They do a blessing, and they came over to the house, and they did a blessing, and I took my yarmulke off.
Okay.
And I kept it off for about 3 days, and I said, wait a minute. One of the reasons I wore it was so people would know that I am Jewish.
Right.
Jewish here in the state of Oklahoma.
Right.
And that this state belongs to me as much as it does to anybody else.
Agreed.
So I put it back on after those 3 days and have not taken it off since.
Good for you. Good for you.
So that's the way that I identify with those who marginalized communities.
And so when people see you with your yarmulke on, so context, as you can tell, I like to kind of pivot
absolutely.
Just for purposes of what I'm getting ready to say. So my last name is Chang, and most people, when they see me for the first time, I don't look like what they think I should look like.
Really?
And so if I could like get $10 for every time the eyebrows raise when they see me, I'd be pretty
rich.
Yeah, I'd be pretty rich. So I asked this question based on my own experience. What are some of the facial expressions you get when people see you in a yarmulke?
It goes the distance. It really does. I've had people, when I was shopping at Walmart, come running up to me. I have no idea what was going to happen. They came up and said, I really support you all and who you are.
I could imagine that could be a little eerie.
Someone
running up,
But
yeah.
When they first do, and then they say they support, and then you've got it the other way too. People make faces. I've had comments of, why don't you go back to where you came from? And I said, Ponca City.
Right.
Because that's where I was born.
Right. That's where I'm from.
Yeah. So, yeah. But I've had and everything kind of in between, good and bad.
So, and thank you for sharing that experience. More context. I'm a native Californian, Bay Area, so very accustomed to seeing yarmulkes and a variety of other.
As well as the whole Orthodox.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
That's why I asked you what kind of Jew do you identify as.
Yeah.
How, in your experience, collectively, how are Jews viewed here in Oklahoma?
For the most part, I think that we have not had problems here in the state of Oklahoma. The total Jewish population is about 4,800 Jewish people who live here in the state, most predominantly in Oklahoma City and
Tulsa. Right.
But we have a number that are in Norman, large, because of university there, and some of the other university towns.
Right.
You will find because of professors and stuff.
Right.
The reason we had a population in Ponca City, that's where my parents were actually sent when they immigrated here to the United States. Yeah. And the reason there was a Jewish population there is because we had Conoco and City Service there.
Got it.
And so there were a number of Jewish engineers,
Got it.
That worked for those organizations. And out of that, of course, grows from stores and, the people had and everything. And so, that was the situation.
So while pursuing my undergrad and graduate in anthropology at OU, had a professor, Dr. Misha Klein, shout out to Misha, who also is from the Bay Area and taught a class on the Jewishness of Jews. I think I'm saying that right. And so that was one of my first times, and this had to be like 07, 08, of being exposed to the different temples, like in Oklahoma City and in Tulsa. And one thing that is a common was how the buildings are positioned. The entrance is in the back. I know why, but why is that?
I have no idea, to be honest with you.
Really?
Yeah, you can enlighten me.
Well, I was told that there was a time where Jews were not welcomed here in Oklahoma.
Okay.
And their lives were threatened.
Well, that is true, but yeah.
And so to ensure their safety to worship the way they choose to worship, buildings were built to not suggest that it is a temple, that
Right.
it's just another building.
Right. Interesting. I have not heard that here
Really?
in Oklahoma. Yeah.
Okay.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, but most temples
Well,
are...
I'm trying to think. Yeah, the Temple B'nai Israel, which is the Reform
Yes.
temple here, which is where we belong to, and then Emmanuel Synagogue, which
Yes.
is here. We belong there too because that's where Joan grew up here because she grew up in
Yes.
Oklahoma City and she grew
Yes.
up in the synagogue there.
Yes.
And then the third one that we have here is the Chabad Living Center.
Yes.
So, which is a very orthodox, and
Yes.
Emmanuel Synagogue is conservative. So we
Yes.
have the whole range right here.
Yes.
Here, and so if people really want to learn the differences, they're welcome at any of these places. They'd be more than welcome to go and attend any of the services anywhere, to go and talk with the rabbis and learn about it and stuff. So I would recommend that if people would like to learn.
Agreed.
But yeah, but I do belong to Reform for the most part, Judaism, and believe very strongly in it, and it is because of the whole social context and social action, social justice part of what that is. And if you go back and read through our text, Hebrew text, and our other texts in the prayer books, you will see it literally there. We have an obligation. Oh God, now my mind just went blank. Tikkun olam is a phrase in Hebrew, and it means to literally repair the broken world. That is our responsibility. And while it is not our responsibility to finish the job, neither is it our job to ignore it. And so that's, when I learned about that early on in my life, that was, and of course my parents' upbringing with me is why that was so important. So
I get it. You and I, before we started recording, we're talking about different religions, and the commonality is basically to make sure that every human being is treated like a human being. And for me personally, growing up in the religion that I grew up in, there was so much focus placed on getting to the afterlife. Very little attention was given to this life. And forever grateful for those lessons that I was taught as a young Christian. I was raised Church of God in Christ and Pentecostal. And so forever grateful for it. There was just always that part that was missing for me. And so when I would visit Catholic church or temples or other spaces once I got older and saw that there was a commitment in other spaces to disrupt, to push against the way we've always done it, realized that, yeah, that's my purpose in life. And like you and I were talking earlier, Jesus, Buddha, all of them, they were disruptors.
Jesus was the biggest disruptor of all.
They were disruptor. They were flipping tables and all kinds of things.
Right.
Yes.
That's right. And
because the commitment, as you said, was when there's a problem, we have to fix it.
right. Yeah. And they were very good at that. And while I would also throw in another non-religious person, I don't know how religious he was, but that would be Nelson Mandela, and who was one of my favorite all-time
Same.
human beings.
Same.
But speaking of social justice, that was one of the issues that I was involved in, arrested 3 times in Washington for demonstrating outside of the South African embassy, and
Wow.
arrested. So
Wow. Did
So
you get
to
to
me-
meet him?
nope, never met him. No.
Because
No.
he is one of him and Princess Diana. If I could bring 2 people from the
Yeah.
past, those would be my 2.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I would love to. I quote Nelson Mandela, and when I sign my book, if it's a teacher, the quote that I put in there is that what he said was, education is the most powerful weapon that we have to change the world.
Agreed.
And he's right.
Agreed. He also said one that I quote, and I can't quote it verbatim. He spoke about leading from the back.
Right.
I think collectively, as many human beings that become in positions of leadership, the assumption is you're in the front. But leading from the back, you only step into that position when there's a need.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
But otherwise, you're allowing the community, the group, whoever, to do what they know they were meant to do.
Yeah. My understanding was that he did not want to run for president in South Africa.
Correct.
And it was just so overwhelming that they felt that at the time he would be the one person that could bring people together. And he did. Leclerc and he were, it's pretty amazing what they ended up doing.
Right.
So, yeah.
So, want to definitely talk about respect for diversity and or Judaism as it relates to education. But let's talk a little bit about your book.
Okay.
Tell us about your book.
It's called Until We Meet Again. It is the true story of my parents' experience in the Holocaust. And so I will go back and give the context for that.
Yay! Yay!
I was sitting in the living room with my parents. Well, I'll go back and tell a funny story first.
Okay.
Okay. And it relates to this directly. Okay. So my parents were, my dad was liberated by the American forces, and my mom was liberated by the Russian forces from during World War II. And they had made a promise to each other. They were boyfriend and girlfriend, that when the war was over, if they were separated, they would meet back in their hometown. They were separated separately, but they did go back and found each other. And so my dad brought my mom out because she was in Poland, and he was living in Germany on the American side. And so they were living there for like 4.5 years. They were living in this town called Eggenfelden that used to be a resort town for the Nazis. So it had all these gorgeous hotels that had been built there. Well, the Americans took those hotels and turned them into apartments for the survivors. And so my mom and dad were living there, and a lot of their friends were living in that community. And my mom did not want to live in Germany. She just did not. And they had a really good life there, but she did not want to live in Germany. And she said, we need to go and apply for visas. And my dad said they lived on the 3rd floor in their apartment. And my dad took her by the hand, brought her over to the window that overlooked a courtyard.
Okay.
And he said, look out and tell me what you see there. And she looked out and she said, and she started naming off some of their friends who were walking around in the courtyard.
Okay.
And he said, every one of them applied for visas 4 years ago, and they're still here waiting. And my mom said, but if we don't put our name on the list, then we're never going to.
Right.
So my
Good point.
Yeah. So my dad said to her, fine, you want to put our name on the list? Fine. So my mom got a babysitter for my brother. He was born in Germany.
Okay.
And she got on a train and went to Munich, where the nearest American consulate was.
Okay.
She didn't speak a word of English.
Wow.
She got to the consulate, and they had a translator there, but you know what happens in translation.
Yes.
So
yes.
She's telling, who she is and the story, and they're translating that too. So this American consulate person said to her, would you be willing to go? She didn't understand any English either.
Okay.
He said, if we give you visas early on, would you be willing to go what we call the southern route?
Okay.
And my mom, sure,
You're
having
right.
no idea what he was even talking about,
She was focused on that visa.
Yes. And of course, the regular route was coming through Ellis Island. And so my mom said yes, having no idea what she was saying yes to. So she went back home and told her husband, my dad, future dad. And he said, fine, now we can wait for 4 years. They get a call 2 weeks later saying that they needed to see my dad and their son, because my mom had said she was married and she had a small child, and so they wanted to verify that. So they got on a train, went back to the consulate, and my dad was asked questions and stuff. But they didn't ask him that question about the southern route.
Okay.
So they'd already asked that, and my mom said yes, no problem. So they said, fine, we'll be in touch with you. Got on the train, went back to Eggenfelden, their hometown. My dad said, now we can wait for 4 years. They got a call 2 weeks later saying to be ready to leave in a week. What did that mean, to be ready? It meant everything that they had accumulated in 4.5 years they had to give away. Because they only allowed, at that time, to bring a single suitcase and like $100. That was it. So they sold jewelry. My dad had to give away a Mercedes-Benz that he had, a motorcycle with a sidecar, jewelry that he had bought for my mom, from living there and stuff. All of it had to be given away because they couldn't bring it in.
Right.
So they get on the ship, and the ship takes off, 1,936 passengers. It stops in Venezuela and lets off 300 survivors in Venezuela that were being sponsored by the Jewish community in Venezuela.
Yes.
And the ship came on in to its southern route of New Orleans.
Oh, wow.
That was the southern route. And they had over-sponsored in New Orleans how many Jews they could take in.
Okay.
So while they were actually on the boat, Hayes and B'nai B'rith were trying to find sponsors for this young couple that would sponsor them and take them in. My mom, my dad, and my brother. And this small little Jewish community in Ponca City, Oklahoma, said that they would do it.
Wow, Oklahoma. Okay.
Well, he had no idea what Oklahoma was.
And what year is this?
This is 1950.
Wow.
And so they put him on they had a translator there to tell my dad that the conductor will tell you when it's time to get off the train.
Okay.
I said, fine. So the train takes off, and the first place it goes back through, they looked out in New Orleans, nice big place, lots of people and cars and all this kind of stuff. Train takes off, goes into Houston. Okay, big city, still, My dad got up, took suitcases out off the top, and the conductor came by and said, no, not here. Put the suitcases back, the train takes off again, and it stops in Dallas. And, didn't look as big as the city they just came from in Houston, but it's still a big-sized city. It's starting to get dark, and the conductor says, no, this is not it. Train takes off, pulls into Oklahoma City. It's dark. Not a large city, at that time, back in 1950. But there were lots of lights, and he saw buildings and everything. No, this is not it. Train takes off, pitch dark. They go for about an hour and a half ride, 2 hours. The train stops. My dad looks out, and there's a single lamp post, And he says, well, this can't be it because, they're probably getting water or food, to refresh. The conductor comes by and says, this is your stop. Wow. And my dad looked out. I saw that one lamp post and one small little building. They got off the train took off. The people who were supposed to meet them were late. So my mom and dad and brother are standing there, and my dad said, quote, he turned and looked at his wife and said, this is why you brought me to America.
Right. Wow.
But eventually the people showed up, and they lived there for 62 years and were looked at as heroes there in that community.
Wow. That is a beautiful story.
And so how does that go on to the Judaism and my feelings about that? I went in, we were sitting in the living room one night, and it was the first time that I noticed on my parents' wrist a K and an L in blue ink right here on that people can't see, I know, but it's on the top of their wrist. And on the inside of my mother's forearm was the letter A followed by the number 26326. And I asked my parents what those were. And it was the first time they explained to me that they were survivors of the Holocaust and what that meant. And they tried to tell me in the least horrifying and the simplest of terms of what they had gone through.
About how old were you?
6.
Okay.
And why I didn't have any family, what had happened. That would be my first experience with anti-Semitism. I would love to say that that was the last time I had an experience with anti-Semitism, but we know growing up in this country and what has gone on in the past and stuff, and even going on today.
Right.
So that is what started me on my path. I came home. My dad came home from work on August the 19th. It was a Saturday in 1958. And he did the thing that he always did. When he came home from work, sat down in his favorite chair, turned on the TV to watch the news.
Okay.
And there was a story on that really bothered him on the news that night. Bothered him so much that he kept following it in the newspaper and then on TV until he had a day off. And I was playing in the backyard, and he said, "Mike, come and take a ride with me and your mom." So I said, "Great, okay." I'm 7 years old. We get in the car, and my parents drive me to a park in Ponca City.
Okay.
We get out of the car, we walk into the park, nice August Oklahoma day, hot, but, wonderful. And they walk me up to a water fountain, and they asked me to take a drink out of the water fountain. And I did, and my dad said, "How did that taste?" I said, "Great, hot August day in Oklahoma, cold water from a fountain, what could be better?" My dad then asked me to read the sign on the water fountain to him. I did, and it said, "Whites only." Without saying a word, my dad walked me over to another water fountain, and he asked me to take a drink out of it. And I did. And he said, "How did that taste?" And I said, "The same as the water that I just drank at over there." And again, he asked me to read the sign on the water fountain to him. And I did, and it said, "Coloreds only." Excuse me. Without saying a word, we walked back to the car. My parents drove me down to the bus station. Parked the car, got out, and walked in. Nice area, ceiling fans going on this hot August day, nice chairs where people were waiting for the buses to come in, to leave, or waiting on relatives or whoever to come in. And they walked me up to a podium, and there was a sign on it. And again, my parents asked me to read the sign with them. The three of us read the sign together, and it said, "White waiting area." Now, all of my parents' immediate family and actually distant relatives were murdered in the Holocaust, except for one brother each.
Okay.
And so that was the situation when we walked. My dad and mom walked me to the back of the bus station. Not so nice area. Broken chairs, no ceiling fans on this hot, sweaty day.
Okay.
And there was a sign up on the wall. And again, my dad asked me to read the sign with him. And the three of us read the sign that said, "Colored waiting area." And my dad then looked at me, his 7-year-old son, and he said, "I want you to always remember what I've shown you today, because that's the reason that you don't have any aunts and uncles and grandparents and lots of cousins, because people looked at them as being different and inferior human beings."
Right.
What my dad saw on television that day that so bothered him that he wanted to make sure his son understood it was 13 young black kids, aged 17 to 16, going into Katz Drug Store in downtown Oklahoma City, sitting down and asking for a Coca-Cola.
Right. The sit-inners. Yeah.
And that was the first thing that my dad saw that he needed me to understand what was going on. And of course, that led to eventually desegregating this entire country.
Right.
Nobody understands the impact of those 13 kids, what they did. And so I do. And my dad did on that day, and the importance of what that was. That was when I was 7. When I was 8, I had another experience. My parents had a very close Holocaust survivor friend who lived in Tulsa. And so we used to go there and visit him. So on this one day in 1959, we'd gone to Tulsa, with my dad with a specific purpose. And so we went and we had lunch there and stuff, and the person's name was Sherman Ray, and he said, are you ready to go now? And my dad said, yeah. So we all got into the car, and they drove me to a place in Tulsa called Greenwood. And he explained to us, Holocaust survivor had to do this when Oklahomans didn't even know about it, about the Tulsa Race Massacre and what took place. When I was 6, I learned about anti-Semitism. When I was 7, I learned about racism. And then when I was 8, I learned about what kind of things we would do in this country.
Wow. Wow, wow.
So that's where all of this comes from.
Got it. Wow. Say the title of the book again.
Until We Meet Again.
And where is it available?
Amazon.
Okay.
And what's the bookstore in Oklahoma City? Not Best of Books. That's in Edmond.
Barnes &
across
Noble?
From Barnes & Noble has some across from Penn Square.
Oh,
God, I can't believe that. I was just there to hear Timothy Snyder speak.
something books.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh, this is
God.
embarrassing because I can't remember it either.
It's so bad. I can't believe
It'll
that.
come to me.
Yes.
It'll come to me. Actually, I'm just going to look it up while we. Um,
And they can also buy it from me.
Perfect. So as you were sharing your beautiful story of your parents, I was thinking of, I still remember watching I was a teenager, watching the Josephine Baker story. And there was a part, so apparently during that time, most artists, specifically African Americans, had to go through the Chitlin circuit. And I remember one promoter saying he got tired of seeing signage in the South that said, no dogs, no Jews, no N-word. And that was one of the first times where I was introduced to the connection that Jews and African Americans have had. Yeah. Because we did not fit the mold of white. And I say this in most of the disruptors that Thick Descriptions offers. When I'm referring to someone that is non-melanated, I call them European American. And people will ask me, well, why don't you say white? I said, well, the origin of the word white meant you were Christian, male, and you own land. So if you're a Christian, that meant you couldn't be a Jew.
Right.